52 years ago that the great John Coltrane just died a few days ago. And that's part of the legacy as well. I think anytime we talk about politics, we really need to talk about the artists, because the fundamental question when it comes to black people wrestling with the vicious legacy of white supremacy in this empire is, what does it mean to be human? What kind of courage, what kind of vision, what costs are we willing really to bear, what kind of risks are we really willing to take? And the fact that here we are here, now this is the Commonwealth Club, 1903, he goes back, you know what I mean? Edward F. Adams, the first presentation he gave, he said, we want to find the truth and set it loose in the world. 1903, that's Vanilla Brother, way up power elite, with the president of San Francisco State, president of Berkeley, president of banks and so forth. And then in the space of Harry Bridges, what a fascinating class, Bridge, born in Australia, fundamentally socialized, radicalized by the critique not just of capitalism, but of white supremacy as well, so the International Longshoremen will become not just a site institutionally that will exemplify various kinds of struggles for justice, but would be open to brothers like Martin Luther King Jr. And Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer and Stokely Carmichael. Those are just not names in a pantheon. Those are human beings who decided in their own imperfection to try to be forces for good. We need a dialectical interplay between the ones on the outside who will just bring all kind of wildness in the critique, and then the ones on the inside to give them some space so they can kind of tilt the power in such a way that those stone-cold everyday people have a dignity and a decency. And so here we are in 2019. Oh, Lord have mercy. That's why our musicians are so paradigmatic. That's why they're the model. Because we understand when John Coltrane's talking about love supreme, he's not just talking about the love of a slice.
Right.
He's talking about a love that begins with the least of these. Those catching hell in the language of Malcolm X, and then spilling over, then raising your voices. So here we are in 2019 saying, well, where are the voices that are willing to tell the truth about the gangster in the White House? Tell the truth about it. Okay. But as we talked about last year as well, to recognize you say, oh, Brother West, you call him a gangster. No, that's exactly right. That's right. That's not a subjective expression. That's an objective condition. Gangsters are gangsters based on evidence. Brother Willie Brown knows I grew up on the chocolate side of Sacramento, and I know there's gangster inside of me. I know what it's like to be a gangster. I grew up with some gangsters. But when I met Jesus and decided, lo and behold, I'm a redeemed sinner now with gangster proclivities. I'm honest about thugs and gangsters in high places, whatever color they come in, to keep them accountable across the board. There's the primacy of the moral, primacy of the spiritual that has a systemic analysis of the system under which we live, which is one of empire. That's why we should never say this nation is a nation of immigrants. That's a lie. When you hear it on the neoliberal corporate media, just say to yourself, that's a lie. Indigenous peoples were here. Thousands and thousands and thousands. Anytime they say U.S. slavery is America's original sin, that's a neoliberal lie. That was the second sin.
Yeah.
But don't say it's original. We don't need to highlight black suffering in such a way that it downplays somebody else's suffering. White supremacy began as an imperial attempt to engage in the stealing of this land for looking for gold. That's California's story in part, gold rush. And what happens in a society in which you view life as a gold rush, you end up worshiping the golden calf. And the golden rule becomes he or she rules who has the gold. And those who have very little power are pushed more and more to the margin. So we need voices, institutions like civil rights, the Human Rights Commission and others. We need churches, mosques, synagogues, civic institutions, trade unions, professors, everyday peoples raising their voices in the name of a love and justice that tells the truth about the people in power and brings pressure to bear to change it.
Yeah.
But it's hard these days in a market-driven society to even get to truth. Just like in war, truth is the first casualty. So it is in this battlefield that we find ourselves on. It's hard to even get the people who are telling the truth. Everybody concerned about their careers, concerned about the next opportunity, concerned about their particular move, their upward mobility, strategic move. What happened to the truth?
Well,
Young folk hungry for it.
What's this? What's in here? Lots of pages to start with.
Well, it's a testament of a particular human being, of a particular brother who's trying to make sense of the world and leave the world just a little bit better than when he found it, when he makes his exit. Very much a product of the black church, a product of a loving black family with mom and dad and my older brother and two younger sisters, deeply empowered by Harvard College, Princeton University in philosophy, and highly privileged in terms of being able to have access to time to write and lecture and run my mouth around the country. But in the end, I think I'm still first and foremost a blues man in the life of the mind, first and foremost a jazz man in the world of ideas. And what I mean by that is always keeping track of the unjustified suffering in the world, the unnecessary social misery, keeping a limelight on the plight and predicament of what Franz Fanon called the wretched of the earth. How do we broaden the scope of human dignity? That's what I'm after.
Let me ask you about that, because in all those episodes like Littleton, I don't know what they're 8 or 9 the last couple of years.
Exactly.
They were all white males.
Yes.
Does that tell you anything?
Well, I mean, one, it means that this is a problem of our beloved children across race, across region, but it also is a function of the press. That is to say that black kids have been dealing with bullets for a long time in junior high and high school. But when black children point guns at other black children, that is less news than when white children point guns at other white children. Unfortunately, that's still the case in our society, you see. So that what we have a problem here now is a low quality of life of children in terms of the state of their souls, spiritual malnutrition, existential emptiness, hungry, thirsty for something bigger than themselves, but more and more finding themselves obsessed with instant gratification, obsessed with putting others down in order for them to feel like they are somebody, you see.
I come from an old traditional stance. I want a story, and I want a beginning, a middle, and an end. I would like a song that has meaning, touches your heart. Just recently I have found a song that I would consider R&B that has a hook, which is something that I'm not thrilled with. But the groove is so good that I'm willing to listen to this, yeah. But I'm basically a lyric person. I really want to tell a story.
Yeah.
I would like songs that deal with relationships, the love of man for a woman, man, children, God. I don't like throwaway songs. I really want to say something.
Why do you still care? Why do you still care enough to keep, you're at a point in your life where you could go back, you could do your month in Vegas and Florence Henderson could open up and you could go and hit a couple of balls and then some pinball.
Yeah.
Why do you still care so much?
Well, I'm not comparing myself to any of these people, believe me. But you wouldn't say to Picasso, when are you going to put those brushes down? Get rid of the canvas, you've done it. You know,
Right.
I'm an entertainer, first and foremost, but there's art involved here. And an artist has an obligation to be en route, to be going somewhere. There's a journey involved here, and you don't know where it is, and that's the fun. So you're always going to be seeking and looking and going and trying to challenge yourself. So without sitting around thinking of that a lot, it drives you and it keeps you trying to be fresh, trying to be new, trying to call on yourself a little more, you know.
And willing to put up with the grueling
Yeah.
promotional schedule and everything else. You've got,
The only way.
Picasso never had to do morning shows in Albuquerque.
Right.
You know.
And the only way I can do this is to go where the people are. They will not come to my house. We've offered bus rides and everything. They will not come. I have to go to Stevens Point, Wisconsin, or wherever it is. And the audiences are great, and they buy the tickets ahead of time, and they really wait for you to come there and see it. In the theaters and concert halls, it's special, because the audience, they do it beforehand, and you're the whole evening. In Las Vegas, you're an afterthought. You're an also. Well, we could go gambling, we could go hookering, we could get drunk, we could go to the convention. No, let's go see this guy. And if they like you, they do, but they're not committed fans. So it's a different tone there. But it still works. You can still do some things there that you can feel good about, you know.
Do you feel your place in comedy now? Do you feel that, you know, because we've been spending a lot of time at the festival, and everybody that I would mention, you know, hey, I'm going to do this George Carlin tribute, and their faces light up. And to a person, Really, Carlin? And can I meet him? Is he around? Do you feel that place? Is that
Well, that is growing on me. I think, longevity is a wonderful thing. Sometimes you get applause just for not being dead when you say, it's true. When you say, I'm going to be 60, they applaud that. Wonderful, not dead, 60. But I'm getting a sense of it. When you're in planes 3 days a week, I go out every Friday, I come home every Monday. It's 3 different cities, 3 different nights, airports, hotel lobbies, and people are wonderful. I love individuals. I hate groups of people. I hate people who have a group of people with a common purpose. Because pretty soon they have little hats, and armbands, and fight songs, and a list of people they're going to visit at 3 a.m. So I dislike and despise groups of people, but I love individuals. Every person you look at, you can see the universe in their eyes if you're really looking, and they're great. And so cumulatively, I have gotten the feeling that I'm in this big family, a family life I never had, by the way, this, so to say, extended family of people who feel like you're their cousin. It's like, Georgie, 1961, I saw you. Hey, remember that? Yeah. Oh, and you know what you said? And I said, did I? Oh, yeah. So it's, it's just great. And so cumulatively, you say, well, I guess I'm in the family. I guess it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure in the course of your career in making music of this type, very powerful music, very direct music that addresses itself to things that are maybe not necessarily pleasant, you've been confronted with the question of the fact that this music is not comfortable music, that this is music that it's not like the kind of music you go into a nightclub and, kick back with a scotch to. How do you address yourself to your purposes as an artist?
Well, it's theatrical. A film was made to this music by an Italian filmmaker, Freedom Now Sweet, and he did it with stills and slides. And in this particular piece, the first section, which was the preparation of the triptych, you'd see what he did was you'd see say he panned the camera on a group of people who looked like they were having a picnic, and it was a serene scene, in the deep South. Families who were standing around eating hot dogs or whatever. And then when it got to that screaming section, the camera panned on a lynching. So here was a group of white families, children, and so forth. And this film he got from, Gianni Amici was the filmmaker, so he got it from the CIA, of a group of citizens witnessing a black man being lynched who was hung on a tree. And so in directing it to what Abby was doing, she would be just a young black woman walking through the forest, and all of a sudden she sees a man hung up on a tree with his neck broke and his privates cut off of his body. And that reaction is what she would have hit immediately. And so it's theatrical. But for us, it was also to take outside sounds like screams and hollers and create some kind of musical texture with them and to create a design with it. And that was what we were after in the whole piece.
Would you like to discuss your association with Parker and specifically talk about his impact in allowing you to develop and open up as a soloist, and maybe give us a taste of Coco to take this out?
Well, it would be difficult to give you a taste of Coco because Coco was Charlie Parker, but he was really instrumental in many ways in helping me to develop the drum solo as I saw it. I had a lot of freedom working with Charlie Parker. He would many times just write one sheet of music when we went into the studio to record. He'd just write a part for miles. He'd write a trumpet part. He would transpose his part from the trumpet part because alto saxophone is in a different key. And Miles is in, say, it's a B-flat concert instrument. He'd write Miles's part and then transpose it to his E-flat instrument. But the rhythm section, the bassist and the pianist, he just tell them the harmonic changes that went with the melodic line that he created, and he'd look over at me and just tell me that I had freedom to do what I wanted to do, that I would find my own way. And so this gave me the kind of freedom that that helped me to develop the drum solo, and Coco was my first long drum solo piece.
Now, go forward. And please take notes. I'm moving very quickly through time. In 1979, with the Sugar Hill Gang, we sold 2 million records, and suddenly everything hip-hop was about was cool to the American mainstream. Before Rapper's Delight, everything we did was wrong. We had baggy clothes, some of them were ripped. There was a rag, the rags you see the Crips and Bloods wear, and now some rappers, red, blue, this, that, and the other. Those mechanics rags is what they were. Those mechanics rags was like 10 for 25 cents. We took the mechanics rag, put it on our head, made it drape out the back of our pocket. America said, that is criminal, that is wrong, you will never succeed in society dressing like the way you dress. Baggy clothes, big shirts, dreadlocks hair, bald head, and we were wrong. So now bring it over to the business. The people who are true to hip hop are true to that concept of community. I'm not doing this for my own good only. Sure, I gotta eat, but I don't eat until you eat. Whole different psychology. One psychology is the rapper. The rapper says, me, ma, me, ma. The MC says, us, our, we. The rapper is a product of corporate marketing, which is not bad. Don't think that what I'm saying is to belittle that. It's not. This is the condition of the rapper. The rapper is corporate marketing. The MC is community respect. Where do you get your power? You can get your power from being every day on Much Music, every day on MTV, every day on these magazine covers, and you get a degree of power. Your popularity and celebrity makes the audience trust in your message. Thus, we can sell you something. The MC says, I have principles I have to stand on. And I would feel stupid going against, I can't even walk down the street if I say, look or dress like that, because there's a community I have to deal with. I'm speaking on behalf of them. They've brought me up here to talk to you. The corporate, the cultural. The corporate, the cultural. For many years, this was a fight. Are you in this for the money, or are you in this for the love? Are you in this just to get what you can get and get out, or is this your lifestyle? Neither side is wrong. Both determine just who you are. There's no right or wrong answer. If you're a rapper and you say, listen, I'm not really in all this hip hop and breaking and everything. Listen, I'm just trying to get a little money and I can rap and I'm gonna rap and get this money and I'm gonna do a movie deal and something else. I'm not really interested in this. I'm just gonna use the rap to get me where I'm going. And there ain't nothing wrong with that. There ain't nothing wrong with that. If that's your style, that's your style. The repercussions, though, is that you won't last long as a rapper. You may put out 1 or 2 albums, and then that'll be that. Over here, culturally, you are constantly listening to the people, constantly listening to their gripes, to their pains, to their joys, and you turn that into lyrics. And you tell the people what they can't say on the mic, because they don't have the mic. You don't have the mic. So the MC tells you what is already on your mind. The rapper tells you what's on his or her mind. Sometimes we have to be rappers. I'm the greatest MC that ever touched the mic. Turn it up, get the cameras bright. That's me. That's rap. One of the greatest rappers of all time, Muhammad Ali. If you ever want to see the root of rap, listen to Muhammad Ali, and he gets respect. So don't think that rap is this slowly thing that all these rappers, they messing up the culture. Not really. We'll get into that in a minute. It's a choice. I'm in this for the money. And that's it.
Right? So you need to be decisive. You need integrity. You need to be open communication with people. And you need open communication to people. And you need open communication with people. You need to be able to take that in. And then you're willing to like interact with the world under the condition that everybody else in the world is also so disposed. So you need to actively make people who are decisive and people who have integrity and people who are open with people and people who are open to. And the problem with that is there are a lot of institutions that are built on lies. Unfortunately, and this is just confusing, and it confuses the plans you make for yourself, and it distorts your view of reality. There are a lot of institutions that are built on lies. And in America, there's great scholarship. The lies start, you learn to lie at home. So some people have homes that are truth-free zones, where if you actually tell the truth about how your day went, you would break some rule of decorum, and your parents would get upset at you. How dare you tell me how your day actually went, or what you actually did at school, or like what you actually did on your date, or who you actually like. So you learn how to lie in school, and they call it you learn how to lie at home, and they call it manners. And maybe you go to church, and where everyone teaches you how to lie. The church, if you don't go to a great church, and they call that manners too. And then you go to school and you become an expert liar because you've been well trained to lie at home and you've been well trained to lie at church, and you go to school and like you know how to play the game and lying there. But it ends up with not only you confusing yourself about what you want and who you are, you end up confusing other people who actually want to be honest with you. So we need to rebuild. Your task, class of 2020, is to rebuild an America where truth-telling is honored, so that we can solve our problems and not have a distorted view of reality and not distort other people's view of reality, even if their dignity is held in the lie. I hope you go forth and think about how you create the institutions of self-determination that you need in order to be free, but include other people, because you can't be free and alone at the same time. You're just alone and alienated and very anxious about the world that could always frustrate your plans. So you need to remake the world that is not going to frustrate your plans, but is going to enable them. It is also the case that you can't climb in a broken system while you're changing it. A lot of people will tell you stories about how they can, change the world as they succeed in it as is. I'm sorry to break that. That's just not the case. That's just not the case. Because the world is an organism. It's got antibodies that will frustrate any real change makers. So anytime you're really serious about changing the world for the better, there's going to be like the world's antibodies are going to attack you. And if you're going to succeed in the world as is, that means not being attacked by them. So be very wary of careerists who think they can both change the world and succeed it in the same way, especially if this is like an institution of higher education or anybody who spent their entire life getting all A's by doing exactly what they were told to do. That might not prepare them for justice work. It might prepare them for doing exactly what they're told, which might be rooted in your degradation.
The songs have such a broad range of emotions that most women are told through their lives to only say this emotion or men won't like it. You know what I mean? Or men will be frightened of you. And you've had the courage to put out really strong political songs and quite dangerous love songs like...
dangerous? I hope so.
Yeah, I Put a Spell on You. You see, that's
I need a light now.
that is not the sort of thing a man wants to hear, I put a spell on you, because you're saying I'm going to come back and get you if you misbehave.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that...
Well,
Do you agree?
Yeah, I not only agree, but that's how I feel. Right. I mean, life is short.
Right.
You don't get to. People are not easy to know.
Yes.
They're not easy to know, so if you don't tell them how you feel, you're never going to get anywhere, I feel. When I'm finished working, as tired as I am, and my work completely takes all my energy, unfortunately, but when there are kids who come backstage afterwards who want to talk or who are moved to the point, sometimes they're moved to tears, I want to know more about it, and they shake my hand and they kiss me and they want to talk about their problems. I find the time to do so as much as I can I discourage breakfasts and speeches because I don't make speeches, but I will go out of my way, in spite of the fact that I'm too tired to do it, to talk to them at least for 5 minutes or so, to sock to them the same message that I just finished doing on stage, and perhaps to hear some of their grievances, or just to make them feel that they are not alone. Because when you have a few colored kids in a huge white college, any way you cut it, they are alienated, and they feel it. So when I come, I feel a responsibility. They're so glad to see me because I represent something to them, and I can't give them enough, you know. They need me. They need me. And when I'm needed, I have to give. I curse myself afterwards for having no voice, usually, and being so exhausted that I can't do anything for myself. But when they need me for, and the most important thing is, they are our future. It's an investment as far as I am concerned. When I invest time in young people from colleges, I know that I'm going to get that bread back. You know, bread cast upon the water comes back. Because when I see them doing their thing one day and I'm too old to do anything but sit and look at them, I'm going to say, well, I was part of that. I never intend for my children to look at me and be ashamed and say, Mama, why didn't you do something? I will have done mine. And so every time I talk to them, it's an investment to me. And there was a picture of her there. And it was a picture that I have seen many times before. But photography, as you know, has its own way of communicating, just its own mediums do. And all I can tell you is that this picture caught hold of me, and in her eyes, this will sound very strange, but not to people who are really hip, she kept trying to tell me something. I was sitting on the bed, and I remember distinctly saying, I would keep looking at the picture and keep looking at the picture. And of course, the memory of being with her many times kept flooding back in my memory. But I said, and I remember, inspiration is a very strange thing. Sometimes it just happens like a light. And I remember getting a feeling in my body. And I said, that's it. To be young, gifted, and black, that's all. And sat down at the piano at that moment and made up a tune. And it just flowed out of me. I knew what I wanted it to say in essence, but I couldn't get the words together, so I called up my musical director and told him what was on my mind, explained to him a little bit about Lorraine Hansberry because he didn't know her. And he captured the mood, and the song was born less than 2 days later. And that's been less than a month ago. So I really think that she gave it to me. That's what I mean when I say that.
I want to ask about Nat Cole, but I want you to tell me how this tradition feeds into an Ellington and feeds into a Tatum. I know you've touched on it, but...
Well, Ellington was, all of his life, was a stride pianist. I mean, you know... I mean, everything, you listened to what he played, and you heard Willie the Lion, you heard James P. Johnson, because that was really the style that he related to. Mm-hmm. But he wasn't content to do just that. He heard other things. Heard other intervals, and that was one of the things that Monk liked in his work. I mean, you know, Duke would be playing. He'd be playing different kinds of intervals. Just, what is that? You know, it's different. I asked him about that one time. I said, how did you, how do you come up with some of those sounds? And he said, well, you know, if you realize that even though it's the same note on the piano, C sharp and D flat, those are two really different notes because they lead you. If you're thinking D flat, it's got to go down. But if you think in C sharp, it's got to go up. You know, okay. And so he said that gives you another approach to harmony, and it did. I had never thought of intervals in that way. And you listen to some of the things that Ellington wrote, you know. Interesting use of intervals, and his harmonies were straight out of the same kind of feeling of Debussy and Ravel. With 13th chords. know, and his whole approach to harmonic relationships. So, you know, his whole approach was so masterful and so all-encompassing that he influenced Tatum harmonically. He influenced many other younger pianists and arrangers who heard these marvelous sonorities that he would come up with both at the piano and in the orchestra and say, hey, you know, I got to learn what that is.
We were talking about, before we started digressing, about how the adjustment you had to make in relating to the modern styles. And I guess people like Clyde Hart is a pivotal figure.
Absolutely. In
that whole thing. Would you talk a little bit about him, and then talk about how that transition occurred in the music from what we call swing into what we call bebop?
Well, Clyde was one of the people who, when Dizzy was formulating his harmonic ideas using those kind of chords, Clyde was the one who really understood the relationship, the intervallic relationship of those kinds of things. So Dizzy just didn't make this up. I mean, what Clyde had done earlier, he had recorded pieces like this. Sophisticated piece of music. It's called Some Other Spring. It was written by a woman named Irene Hickenbotham. And, you know, you listen to the harmonies in that, and you can see how a pianist like Clyde, who was very harmonically oriented, could really get those sonorities to working. And so when Dizzy began to ask him questions, well, you know, what do you do with a seventh chord? What can you do beyond a seventh chord? 9. Okay, well, what's another note that I can use? Well, you can use this one. So you can alter any of those notes, the famous flatted fifth, and you can raise the 9th, or you can use the 13th. And you can hear how when Dizzy began to work on that, I mean, and Dizzy says that when he discovered this chord, he said that he immediately heard Night in Tunisia. I mean, this is a 13th chord with a raised 9th. And so what he heard, it's all in that, the melody is all in that chord. Yeah. And so he and Charlie Parker and some of the other musicians were beginning to hear the expansions a la Ellington of the harmonic aspects of the music, but more important, their approach to rhythm was changing. So you would get playing off of melodies. Charlie Parker wrote a tune. That was the first melody that I ever heard written by a jazz musician that used fourths. And he wrote that back in about 1945, 1946, you know. But he was hearing things.
What's that piece?
That's called Red Cross. And he recorded it with Tiny Grimes, and it was on a Savoy record that he made. And but he and Dizzy did. They would come to rest in unexpected places for those days, unexpected places. And so people say, gee, what's that weird chord? You know, it's not so weird these days, but because everyone has done it. But in those days, it was very adventurous, and the melodies that they used were totally different. Scrapple from the apple. And so many of the things that Charlie Parker was writing or Dizzy was writing, some of them were based on the harmonic structure of other pieces, but more often they were based on original harmonies like this one. Well, I began to listen to those kind of things, and I began to write my own pieces that had that kind of rhythm to it. So I did things like this. Using some of the kind of intervals that I heard Dizzy using, and also doing some of the things that I heard Bird doing, like this. Now I wrote that for Charlie Parker. It's called
Early Bird?
What is it called?
Is that called Early Bird? Or?
No, Early Bird is another one that I wrote for him. That's, that'll come back to me in a minute. But Early Bird sounds like this. So it has many of the things that I heard. I didn't play it properly, but... One of those long lines that I used to hear Charlie Parker do a lot.
Now, where does Nat Cole fit in this equation?
Nat Cole, coming out of the Earl Hines tradition, where he could play with a very swinging beat and just do... Now he was the quintessential pre-bop player. He did not adopt the rhythms that were a part of bebop, but his harmonic and melodic language was very similar to what the beboppers were using. And one of the things that he did was an expansion of what a man named Milt Buckner did. Milt Buckner, back in 1938-39, was the first that I know of to record using this kind of... Now, that's called a locked hand style or block chords, and one of the simplest way to explain it is that if you take a major chord, major seventh chord with 4 notes, and double the melody, then you have the sound. Now, what Nat Cole did was to double not just the top note, but the top 2 notes, which gave his playing a heavier sound, and he began. It was a very orchestral sound and a very swinging sound, and he had the most influential trio of all between the, I'd say, about 1938 and 1942 or 3.
Yeah. Now, we go through all of this, all these influences in your playing, and then in the one other thing I want to ask you about that happened in the 40s that you had a role in was the beginning of what we call Latin jazz or Afro-Cuban feeling jazz. Can you give us a little background about how you got into that, and then give us a feeling? I know you wrote several pieces that reflected that, and give us a taste of that as well.
Well, I was working with Cozy Cole, and I had done the 7 Lively Arts with Cozy Cole. At that time, Cozy had an office with a saxophonist who used to work with Cab Calloway, whose name was Walter Foots Thomas. I did some records with Walter and played some gigs with him. One of the gigs was at a club called La Conga, and the group that played the show and that was the featured group was the Machito Afro-Cuban Band. Most exciting band I had ever heard in my life. I mean, those guys were just phenomenal. And I'd stand around, we were the intermission group, and I'd stand around and just listen to what they were doing. Their piano player, Joe Loco, got drafted, and Mario Bowser, who was the...
And that's like generic piano. Give me some Joe Loco piano. You know, people would say that.
Well, you know, actually... That kind of montuno was what I played a lot of in those days. The mambo hadn't been named. They were playing it, but it hadn't been called the mambo. I wrote pieces which had those kinds of rhythms. Now, that... play properly. That was one, and I did a lot of tunes that had which had the kind of mambo bass going on. And it was really an exciting thing for me to play the montunos and to play the
Did you work with Machitos?
You know, and so you would play... that was a big part of playing over one chord, those kinds of things. And I remember the first time I was asked to play a montuno, Mario just pointed to me. Now everybody in the band picked up a
So you were working with Machito?
Yeah, I worked with him for until between the time that Loco was drafted and the next pianist could be brought up from Cuba. Rene Hernandez was his name. He was the seminal Latin jazz player. He was highly influenced by Art Tatum, but he is the big influence on all of the contemporary players now. I mean, all of the Cuban players that play really hip, modern harmonies and do and arrange in that way are really highly influenced, whether they consciously or unconsciously, by Rene Hernandez, who was just a phenomenal musician, highly well-schooled musician, and really just a tremendous pianist. And so he was, I learned, you know, a lot of things just looking over his shoulder, because he was terrific. And he would come to Birdland all the time. They worked up the street at a dance hall, and they would come. I'd go up to where they worked. They'd come down to hear me, and I'd listen to what he played. He'd listen to what I played. It's very exciting.
Now, a little bit, moving into the 50s, your style kind of changed. You began to focus more on ballad playing, and a more delicate approach, more lyrical approach. And I've seen comments attributed to you that at this point, maybe some influences like Eddie South and Ben Webster were coming to the fore. And in some ways, this might have been a reaction to what might have been sort of a perversion of what was happening in bebop, or a cheapening of the innovations. You want to describe that phase of your playing and where you were going at that point?
Well, one of the reasons I got into playing ballads a lot was because as house pianists at Birdland, we would play endless choruses of any tune that we played. And so all I was doing was comping for chorus after chorus after chorus after chorus. And so by the time Bird or whoever was the leader turned to me and said, okay, you got it, I wanted to play something I could hear, you know. So I would always, you know, play one of the popular tunes, Laura, or some ballad that gave me a chance to, you know, say... You know, that gave me a chance to explore some harmonies that I was interested in, some clusters, those kinds of things. And I had worked, at that time I was studying with a man named Richard McClanahan, and I was very interested in touch and the kind of sounds I could evoke from the piano. So, and I began to use a kind of harmonic structure that was very peculiar to me, as the sounds I liked. So it sounded harp-like, and it got really the kind of impressionistic flow that I liked.
Oh yeah, Tad was the greatest composer that I've ever heard and orchestrator. I hear a lot of great composers today, and coming up during his time, but they couldn't touch him as far as I'm concerned, and he could never get the recognition that he's supposed to have gotten for his contribution. He contributed more to this form of music than anybody I know, any composer out there. There's not one out there that contributed that much to this music.
And you're saying that in respect to Ellington, Monk?
Well, Duke's music wasn't the kind of, Duke's contribution could never be surpassed. But his music was different than Tad's music. See, Duke loved what Tad came up with. See, Duke came along before Tad. See, Tad's an extension from Duke Ellington, only he changed. Just like when Dizzy was in Cab Calloway's band. Calloway fired him because he was playing too much trumpet. He thought he was playing nothing. Cab thought he was playing nothing, but Dizzy was playing a new constructive way of playing the horn. Guys were playing, the trumpet players started, and they used to think that when Louis Armstrong would hit the C above the staff, that was high C. You know, high C, man, he gonna baptismal C's. Lou used to work up to that, hit that C up there, everybody think, oh, he's above the staff. He go three octaves above that, man, these trumpet players today. Hit him on the head, G's and E's. Lou ain't never played no G's and E's in his day. Way up there, for what reason? Cat Anderson, Whistler, and Dukes, man, came later. Everything changes. The horn started changing. All the old timers didn't like bebop because they couldn't play it. Nice, that ain't nothing, it's noise. It's never been noise, man. It's going to the places where they dare not go. They say, oh no, man, you can't play that flatted fifth. What do you mean you can't play a flatted fifth? Flatted fifth's a pretty chord. You know, if you flatted it, or you do something with the chord out of the ordinary, 1, 3, 5, or whatever that is, that they do, that they were doing with the chords and church chords, and if you dress it up, then you're wrong, but that's not true. Today, all the chords are dressed up beautiful. You write dissonance and things today, you know? You deliberately put two notes together, like a C and a D in a chord. You deliberately do that. Whereas, you know, you don't do that. You can't put those two together. But you do, if you listen to it, according to what you have in the root and what you put on the top, if you've got those two notes in the middle, they sound beautiful. It's a dissonance, but it's for the ear. Listen to the greatest, the great symphonic composers. They had a lot of don'ts that they wouldn't do. If they heard some of the music they hear today, they probably commit suicide. You know what I mean? What they would consider wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I often have said this on different interviews. I think Beethoven and Mozart, Franz Liszt, and had heard Art Tatum, I think they might have committed suicide. If they'd heard a pianist like Art Tatum, I think they might have either marveled at him or decided to jump off the bridge or something. To see somebody playing the piano like that and playing it with so much cleanliness and so much accuracy and so much speed and with so much knowledge of music. But you mention Art Tatum today to our children, they don't know anything about Art Tatum. Greatest that ever played it, to me and to many, many millions of people. Art Tatum is, phew. Billy Taylor, Usher Peterson, they'll tell you about Art Tatum. They knew him. I worked with him, and I knew him every night. Well, you know, Miles is, Miles is a very strange person, and when I say strange person, as far as, it's strange when people talk about him. You know, with me, I know if he reads anything I say, he just laugh and say, well, he knows but people usually say things about him that they don't really know. It's hearsay, and they shouldn't say, shouldn't say anything like that.
How do you, and this may sound like a strange question to evaluate yourself, but how do you see yourself within that echelon of leadership in the reshaping of the music?
Well, I have been given the honorary title, I guess, in respect of being the bebop innovator or predecessor on that instrument, the vibraharp. In other words, being the first to change the instrument in terms of style and the approach of playing after Lionel Hampton. I guess I have been given that credit. And of course, I'm very grateful for that, because once you reach an echelon where you got mostly every musician aspiring to play the same instrument, they want to follow in your footsteps or tell you that my influence had a lot to do with their decision in terms of playing. Well, this is like a congressional medal or something of that level.
Now, the MJQ has had a unique and has had a continuing unique impact on jazz, on American music, on a couple of levels. On the presentational level, the kind of venues that you played, concert halls, museums, festivals, the context that you would play in with symphonies, with strings, with soloists of the caliber of Sonny Rollins, for example, with the Music In, that kind of thing. In terms of the kind of composure or demeanor that you brought to a presentation, and then also in a purely musical way, in the use, I guess, I guess this was John Lewis's influence, the use of certain classical forms and counterpoint,
Well,
those kinds of devices within a jazz context.
John does get the credit for that because he has a very extensive classical background. I emphasize that because in those days, most of us as black musicians did not have a classical background. I was fortunate in the fact that during my high school days, I had a certain amount of classical background, okay? But most jazz musicians, especially black musicians, do not have a classical background, okay? Another reason for this is that we all jointly felt that a lot of the dignity that goes along with the music itself, which I had seen through bands like Duke Ellington and Jimmy Lunceford, had eventually gotten lost in the fact that, well, say, let's take Dress, for example. One of the things that impressed me about those bands was that I was excited by the fact that they dressed so well as playing. You know, this was a large part of it, too, to be dressed on stage and really look like gentlemen. And this had a lot to do with enhancing the music itself. Okay, I feel that somewhere along the way, we eventually lost that respect of the music, you know, and the way we dress. I tell you why. A first impression is a philosophy. You know, a first impression is a lasting one, okay? That means the way you look to me when I first see you as well as the way you sound when I hear you. To me, it's just as important. Okay, in the formation of the quartet, we felt that if we did this, brought this back, wearing tuxedos and always dressed, would bring a lot of the dignity back to the music, which I feel had been removed. And I think this is the reason for that. Also, the classical approach. Now, one of the reasons for the classical approach is that widens the scope as a jazz musician, and this removes a lot of limits and restrictions that you would have. For example, this is something else I don't think any other jazz group has done. I'm not sure. That's why I say, to cover myself, it's not authentic. But we have recorded with 36 different symphonies. Now stop and think about that. 36 different symphonies, including recording with the Stuttgart Symphony, who's considered one of the greatest symphony orchestras in the world, not just in Europe, in the entire world. Okay? We recorded with that symphony. We recorded with the Bozark String Quartet, the Chicago String Quartet, these kind of things that we perform. You know, we perform in many aspects. We perform with the New York American Orchestra. Many symphonies I can name. You know, the Chicago Symphony, Detroit Symphony, Cleveland Symphony, the Boston Pops. We've done all of that. And this is a very strong major asset as a musician in having all of these different directions which you can go. You know, that gives you a very wide scope with which to deal.
You are well known as a ballads player.
That also comes from my singing. That influence never left, of course, and being a major part of my musical career. I lean toward lyricism. You know, I lean towards melodic and lyrical things as opposed to any other kind of music.
It seems like any piece you play, you're able to imbue with the feeling of the blues and bring a certain deep soulfulness to it. What in your background is the basis of that?
Oh, that's easy. That comes from a very basic religious background, which I have. I had a very strict religious upbringing, and the influence of the music itself carries over into whatever style of music that I would play, because the roots of that music and that style is stronger than any other in terms of my direction as far as playing and concept musically.
Here's the question, you'll know exactly what it is, and that is, how does Frank Zappa want to be remembered?
Well, it's not important.
Not important at all? Want to be remembered for the music?
It's not important to even be remembered. I mean, the people who worry about being remembered are guys like Reagan, Bush. These people want to be remembered. And they'll spend a lot of money and do a lot of work to make sure that remembrance is just terrific.
And for Frank Zappa?
I don't care.